Please welcome our panel to the stage. Moderator Heather Rock, Senior Director of Strategy at PG&E. Rob Chapman, Senior Vice President, Energy Delivery and Customer Solutions, and Chief Sustainability Officer for Electric Power Research Institute. Leslie Rich, Senior Consultant, Loan Programs Office, U.S. Department of Energy. And Ron Snedic, Senior Vice President, Corporate Development, GTI Energy.
All right, how are our mics doing? Let's do that quick check.
Test, test.
Woohoo!
Can you hear me? I think without the mic you can hear me.
Man, if those last two speeches didn't get your heartstrings pulled, I don't know what would. that was really amazing, Jason and Quinn. And welcome. Good morning, everyone. I'm Heather Rock. I'm PG&E's Head of Strategy, and I am so excited to be here today, and I'm also so grateful. I am grateful for everyone that's sitting in this auditorium today. I'm grateful for everyone who is joining us online. Because today is about how we're going to work together to solve some of these big challenges that we need when we think about California's energy transition and the massive challenge of adapting and mitigating climate change. And we're going to be talking today about innovation and how and why we do innovation, and how what we're going to do is different than what we've done before. You know, we used to think that innovation was the work of a solo genius, working in a room by him or herself, coming up with ideas. And you might think of Ada Lovelace or Marie Curie or Tesla. You know, I mean Nikola Tesla. But that's actually not how it happens now. And there is a professor at Harvard, Linda Hill, who does research on innovation. And she looks at some of the world's most innovative companies like Pixar and Google that create beautiful works of art and technology. And what she found is that innovation happens when you bring people with diverse backgrounds and different perspectives and different ideas, and you bring them together to work collectively on a problem. And that's why we are here today. We are here to work collectively on a problem, on these set of problems that Jason and Quinn talked about, and we're here to share ideas. We're here to agree, we're here to disagree, we're here to understand what we're going to do to tackle these problem statements. And I can't think of a more critical time to be doing this. I'm sure many of you read the news over the weekend about some of the temperatures that we've been seeing in places like Phoenix or Death Valley. I think it was 124 degrees in Death Valley on Friday. Let's think about where people live, like Sacramento and Fresno and Bakersfield. Palm Springs was 120 degrees. That's where our communities live, our coworkers live, our neighbors live. And it's our job as PG&E and all of you in this room who work with us, we have to keep our grid resilient and online and running to make sure that our communities are cool in these climate conditions. And that's why it's so critical that we are here today to work on these issues, because we will not tackle climate change, either from mitigation or adaptation, without a decarbonized, resilient, and affordable energy transition. That's also why I'm so excited that we have these three remarkable panelists with us today. All of them are innovators in their own right, but they also have a proven track record of bringing people together, of working across the industry, of working with the utilities and the energy companies to bring together these ideas so that we can collectively tackle these problems. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and talk about the work that they're doing. I'll have a set of questions for them, and then audience, it's going to be your turn, both online and here in the room. We're going to have a set amount of time for Q&A. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob for some introductory remarks.
Great, thanks Heather, and I'll be very brief, but Rob Chapman, I'm with the Electric Power Research Institute. I'm the Senior VP of Energy Delivery and Customer Solutions, customer being a key part of that now as we think about the future and the transition. A few facts about EPRI. First and foremost, EPRI does research across the entire electricity value chain. Central generation, whether that be nuclear, fossil, or renewables, wind, solar, et cetera. The grid, transmission, distribution, especially on the system operations today, very important. And then I mentioned the intersection of customer these days and how important that is. We also integrate across fuels, gas and electric being important, and think about that integration as we go forward. From an EPRI perspective, we represent about 450 utility members across the globe. We operate in 45 different countries. We're about $500 million worth of research. And the last point about EPRI, we are a not-for-profit. We operate on behalf of the public. Even though we're primarily funded by the utility industry, at the end of the day, EPRI's credibility to testify in front of Congress and regulatory agencies, et cetera. Like I said, if you've ever remembered Dragnet from being a kid, those of you like me that are that old, Joe Friday, nothing but the facts, and that's EPRI's benefit to the industry. So, thank you, Heather.
All right, Leslie.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me here at this fantastic event. Leslie Rich, a senior consultant with the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office. Been there for about a year. Before that, I spent 30 years as an equity research analyst covering the utility sector on the buy side. So have followed PG&E since deregulation in '97, I think. So in any event, delighted to be at the Loan Programs Office, and you know, what an exciting time. I feel like we're almost at the epicenter of trying to fund the energy transition. Between IIJA and the Inflation Reduction Act, we have over $369 billion of lending authority to help fund innovative energy technologies and the energy transition. So I couldn't be more excited than to be at the center of that. And I'm specifically working with the utility sector as they work through their energy transition and helping them achieve their goals. You know, the combination of tax credits, grants, and low-cost loans are really powerful economic drivers to make technologies that may have not been economically attractive suddenly pencil out. And so we're seeing dramatic interest in our programs because now, you know, concepts like green hydrogen or offshore wind or transmission reconductoring, all kinds of concepts that might not have made economic sense previously. Suddenly, if you get 40 or 50% of it from the government in the form of tax credits, loans, and grants, it really pencils out. So I feel like the energy transition has been supercharged, and it's a really exciting place to be.
All right, Ron.
All set. Hey, Ron Snedic, GTI Energy. I lead corporate development at GTI. I've been here more than 20 years, so a long time. Like EPRI, we're across the value chain. So we're involved in research and development as a nonprofit, make, move, store, and use energy. And we believe very strongly in the dual imperative of not only decarbonizing and getting to net zero by mid-century, but also doing it in an affordable manner that really helps empower the economies around the globe. So it's a really important part of what we do today. Quinn, I loved your saying about the symphony of sustainability. I mean, we're all in this together, and I'm so honored to be with a group of innovators like we have here today. We strongly believe in collaboration, and we strongly believe in taking technology into the marketplace. We do that through our projects, through our R&D, and through partners like yourselves and getting those projects into the market, but also through starting up companies. So at GTI, we actually have 3 subsidiaries that I'll talk a little bit about. One is Frontier Energy that does energy efficiency programs on electric and gas. There's Progeo, which does energy storage and CO2 storage. And then last but not least, SunGas, which is all about renewable and sustainable molecules. But I'm really honored to be here today and excited about your conversation. So thank you.
Great. Well, Leslie, my first question is for you, and playing on a remark you just said about being the epicenter of the energy transition. And some of you in the audience, you might have seen the Wall Street Journal article that came out a few weeks ago, and it was profiling the DOE Loan Program Office and its director, Jigar Shah. And what really struck me when I read it is that there was a quote in the article that called the LPO the Clean Energy Bank of the United States, which is a pretty huge role and a responsibility, right? And when we're thinking about accelerating the energy transition. And it's a huge task, right? And so when we think about that role of governments and policymakers, how do we create that ecosystem to foster that innovation? But when you're also thinking about our taxpayer dollars, how are you also protecting against those risks to avoid those future criticism of should we be doing things like this?
Yeah, it's a great question because our role, the role of the Loan Programs Office, the whole mission is to be the bridge to bankability. And the idea there is to take technologies that are proven but not yet at commercial scale, and to really help them get over that bridge to the point where the capital markets will fund them. So as you think about new technologies, you've got a great idea, you've gone through the technical gauntlet and you've proven it. Maybe you've gone out and done some PE funding rounds, you've done some equity rounds. But if you go to a commercial bank and you say, hey, in order to build my first factory to get up to scale, I really need $300 million. And the bank says, well, have you ever built this before? Do you have customers? Do you have an offtake agreement? Do you have a supply chain? Do you et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the bank might say, no, goodbye, there's the door. Or the bank might say, I'll lend you the money at 15% or something like that. So you're sort of stuck with, I have a great idea, I have some equity, I'm not ready to go public, or may not be ready to go public, and I just can't really get the funding I need at a cost that's reasonable to get me over that bridge to bankability. So that's where the Loan Programs Office can come in, and bear in mind, we can rely on the national labs and thousands of engineers to help vet the technologies. But it also, to your point about taxpayer dollars, is an extremely rigorous process. And actually one of the benefits, I think, for innovative technologies that go through our process and can make it through, because not everyone does, but those that can make it through, it's really a credibility. Because it's tough to make it through our technical review process for the innovative technologies. So it's, I think that article said, they have a lot of money, but there's an orchestra of strings attached or something. The strings attached are that, you really need to be able to make it through our process. That said, we're not unwilling to take risk. So we are willing to sort of lean in and be there, for markets that may not yet quite be fully developed. So an example might be a manufacturing facility, and you say, well, I have a customer for X number of years, but I don't have a customer for 30 years. So is there an opportunity for the Loan Programs Office to say, well, due to our market diligence, we believe there's a market for your product beyond the term of your initial contract, for example. Whereas a commercial bank might say, we're only willing to give you a 7-year loan. We might say, we're willing to give you a 20-year loan, something like that. So it's a risk reward, but we are able to sort of lean in. We have a tremendous amount of technical expertise. And so it's a really exciting place, and some innovators, once they make it through our process, are then able to go get another round of equity funding, for example, because it's a proof of concept in a way. There's also a whole program that isn't tied to innovation, and that's perfect for the utility sector, among many others, and that's the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program. And that program, you don't need to prove innovation, but it's for projects that retool, repower, repurpose, or replace energy infrastructure that's retired or retiring, and replace it with less GHG intensity. Or you can take operating energy infrastructure and reduce its GHG intensity. And that program has up to $250 billion of lending authority. And that's so powerful for the utility sector, again, among other sectors. But it's so perfect for the utility sector because the utility sector is the backbone of the energy transition. I mean, we need the grid, we need the transmission grid, we need the distribution grid, we need the utility scale renewable deployment, and utilities know how to deploy vast amounts of capital on time, on budget, and in a very disciplined manner. So in any event, the 1706 Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program is a program where a tremendous amount of innovation can occur through the utilities. So we can help fund the utilities doing their innovative programs.
Thank you, Leslie. Rob, my next question is for you. So, EPRI is doing all sorts of leading research and development in tandem with the utilities, partnering with utilities and other elements of the energy sector. And we have a lot of folks in the room who might be interested in what has EPRI learned in terms of best practices for working with utilities like PG&E. My second question is, what are some things that you're excited about that you're seeing out there that EPRI has been working on with its partners?
Yeah, awesome question. I'm going to say just from this morning's kickoff how inspiring it is, and I'm going to relate that back to this culture of innovation, which is so important for utilities to establish as step one. And I'll tell you, utilities haven't been historically known as innovators. And by and large, we've been a regulated industry for many years, and now we're in this position where we have this opportunity in front of us. I don't say challenge, I say opportunity. Too many utilities love to play defensive football rather than offensive-minded football. And so with this opportunity in front of us, establishing an innovation of culture that I hope can help support this clean energy transition that's also resilient, that's also affordable. I think that's number one. And Patty, kudos to you, Jason, Heather, Quinn, the entire PG&E team, because I can feel that this morning that you have it. So that's very exciting. But beyond that, let me cite three things that we talk about at EPRI in terms of best practices around innovation. One is around relevance, second is around relationships, and three is around results. So when I speak of relevance, Quinn mentioned North Stars. We have one of the most definite North Stars in our industry that I have seen in a long time. We're going to decarbonize the energy system, and we're going to enable decarbonization of the economy, and we're going to do that by 2050. So it's got a North Star, it's got a time frame on it, it's got a measurable metric that we can use to plot progress there. But we also know on top of that, it's got to be affordable and resilient. So it's not just one North Star, it's really a whole bundle of North Stars like Quinn laid out. And what are the specific problem statements that we need to address to get there? I tie that back to relevance of the research. If you can define your North Stars, you can define your metric, and you can define your problem statements, then you can align the relevance of the research and engage partners in that. So that's number one. Two is relationships. I mentioned EPRI as a global organization. Jason kicked off and he talked about all the participants from the various countries. Relationships, it's not only about you as a utility, working with your utility peers, it's about working with the government, it's about working with other organizations, EPRI, GTI, it's about working with vendors, equipment manufacturers, stakeholders across the energy industry. In that broad swath, the more relationships we can develop, the more eyes that we have looking at a problem, the more creative we can be in a solution going forward. So relevance, number one, relationships, and then the last is results. At the end of the day, R&D that sits on a shelf has no value whatsoever. It's not till it's applied in a prototype, and I love that word that Jason used rather than pilot. And prototype to me implies that, hey, we're ready to begin the process of commercializing scaling versus a pilot, we'll try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll move on to something else. So I love that opportunity, but the whole thing about ultimately doing R&D, it's got to be applied. You got to understand what the impact is. And when I hear Leslie talk, you have the government there available with dollars to help support this process. So those four actually, culture of innovation, and once again, congratulations to PG&E, and then relevance, relationships, and results, three areas for best practices. Things we're excited about, I'll tell you what I'm excited about as a customer. I used to work at PG&E many years ago. And I always joke that when I was at PG&E, and I left in '99, but the customer was only referred to, never as a customer, it was either load or ratepayer. That was the way that we thought in the utility industry. Today is the customers at the center of everything that we are trying to do. But it's not only in terms of how we deal with that customer, how do we leverage all of the distributed energy resources that these customers are investing in and help apply to the solutions that we're trying to achieve for customer, community, and overall society. So I'm really excited by the customer and the trends that I see in distributed energy resources, leveraging all those into a virtual power plant, to use that term, but really focused on customer and making sure the customer's at the center of it.
Love that. All right. Well, Ron, question for you. One of the challenges when we think about R&D is how do we balance the needs, especially when we're thinking about the energy transition of today's needs versus those future needs? And I'm curious, in your perspective, what are some sources of today's innovation that could sort of be that bridge between solving today's energy challenges and looking towards the future?
Thanks for the question, Heather. So, Quinn, actually, maybe Jason, you led with it, but most of the problem statements that PG&E identified were on the gas side of the system. So recognizing that, part of our source of innovation is understanding what the needs are. So we work very closely with the market, whether that be the utilities, whether that be the customers themselves, and of course the innovators that are in this room, academics, the state government agencies, federal government agencies, and others. And we look for those challenges, and then we look for ways to innovate and solve those problems. I'd like to give maybe 3 examples of some innovations and how they might tie together. So I'm going from memory. I took notes, and I left my notepad over there. But so theme number 1, as I recall, was talking about the operational challenges and understanding how we're going to get to net zero with leveraging today's resources for clean energy, clean fuels, clean gases, clean molecules, during a time where we're going to see a reduction in demand, right? So one of the things that we've kicked off is a new collaborative. And by the way, GTI Energy does a ton of work in collaboratives. In the last decade, maybe $1 billion of collaborative R&D really around the energy transition. But this new collaborative is called NZIP, Net Zero Infrastructure Program. We use acronyms for everything, but NZIP is all around mapping out with roadmaps. How are we going to make sure that the infrastructure by region, and in some cases, maybe in the case of California, by state, will allow us to have a pathway to get to net zero? And what role does that multi-billion-dollar infrastructure that we have today, how can it be repurposed to carry new fuels, to carry hydrogen blends, to carry renewable gas, and other things for those hard-to-decarbonize markets and for areas where a gaseous fuel or stored energy is really a big part of the solution. The second theme, as I recall, was around methane emissions. And that's an area that we've been very active in. Some of you maybe in this room have been involved with our Project Veritas. So one of the challenges around methane emissions is really accounting for them, right? So over the last, my whole career, we've been worried about reducing leaks, and a lot of that was around safety, but also around the environment. How do we make sure we just keep driving down the leaking gas? I saw a number come out of an AGA report where they said in the distribution systems, the emissions were reduced 69% since 1990. But that's still not good enough. That's still not getting to zero. And I know PG&E and others are on board with let's get that to zero and doing everything we can to stop that. Veritas allows us to have really clear measurement and understanding where that leaking methane is coming from. Make, move, store, use, across that chain, what is that leakage? When you understand where it's at, it allows you to have the innovation and go after and fix that problem. And then the third, last but not least, I mentioned earlier about one of our subsidiaries, SunGas. This is an old technology, so gasification has been around for decades and decades, but now I think it might be coming to its time because we need, at scale, renewable gases and fuels. And SunGas provides RNG, green methanol, or even SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. And those are ways that we have innovations and working with the ecosystem and maybe even the DOE loan office at some point to get these technologies into the marketplace. Because until they're in the market and they're used at scale, we really haven't won.
All right, well, we're going to get a little spicy right now and do some rapid fire questions. And I did not give them these questions ahead of time. And so a couple words or less. Top 3 places we need innovation for the energy transition. What comes to mind?
The grid, integrating all resources, customer, driving adoption and ensuring predictability of behaviors, and then I'm going to take that a step further. In LMI, low moderate income customers that represent 44% of the households in the U.S., we need to make sure that they're engaged in this transition.
Transmission, 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 and transmission.
Yeah. How do you get the energy there, right? I'll build a little bit on Rob. The consumer, the customer, how are we going to make sure that we have technologies that are affordable that they can put into use at their homes? And how do we do this in a way that we have reliability and affordability and a long-lasting technology? And that's not an easy thing to solve, at least from my perspective.
All right. What is one thing you think is overrated?
Overrated?
And you can't say the color of these chairs.
Well, I'm going to flip that around. One of the overrated hype comments that I hear in the industry is there's no way that we're going to be able to support a clean energy transition, achieve the resiliency that we want, and ensure affordability for consumers. I disagree with that. Done right, this clean energy transition can be resilient and can be affordable going forward.
How do you follow that?
I won't get a round of applause. I'm doing something much more pedantic. Hydrogen for power generation. I hear lots of people talking about hydrogen for power generation, and it's just not the first least cost use. I mean, green hydrogen for industrial decarbonization, fantastic. Line of sight, let's focus on it. But hydrogen for power gen, green hydrogen for, to turn, create green hydrogen and then burn it, it's a ways out. So I sort of wish, there was a little less focus on it for power gen as a solution and more focus on the massive potential green hydrogen has for industrial decarbonization and hard to decarbonize industries. I mean, we really need to go after that. Let's not forget, and let's not just focus on the power sector. Let's focus on the global, the economy-wide emissions as well. So.
Well, point taken, and we will not be putting hydrogen for for generation in our DOE loan application. Ron.
We'll keep that one out of the plan. Overrate's tough. So I don't know that I have an overrated to add. I do agree with you. We have to do things that make sense from an engineering perspective and find ways to actually solve these challenges. But as far as overrated, I love the enthusiasm that takes place not just in California but across the country as we do recognize what's going on with climate change here and making a difference. And I think the United States is really taking a leadership role in driving forward. And it's really something I'm very proud of and didn't picture this being part of my career 25, 30 years ago. And happy to be here today in that.
All right, last question before we start taking some questions from the audience. What is the top thing you're excited about?
Let's see, top thing I'm excited about. I think that what Jason opened his remarks with, that I see policy and regulation helping to drive the change that we need. And I'm going to take that a step further to the fact that EV adoption in California, internal combustion engines will no longer be available by 2035 as a choice. And why is that important? Because I think left to our own devices, it's hard for us to change. Policy regulation needs to help drive some of that change down at the customer level. And I think that given the importance of transport and decarbonizing our economy, that's an important step going forward.
I'm so excited about the transformational role that the Loan Programs Office is having. If you look at some of the conditional loan commitments that have been announced, I mean, there's a $3 billion commitment to Sunnova for, basically government backstop on distributed leasing. And 20% of that will be for low to moderate income customers with a specific focus on Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico is a really hard place to decarbonize and help solve the problems of getting low-cost power to residents. That's just one example of the many, on our website of the conditional loan commitments that we've made that are really, just transformational. Battery manufacturing, lithium processing, battery recycling, long duration energy storage. I mean, these are businesses that probably would not have come to fruition without our backing. And so that's, I don't take credit for any of that, but it's just so exciting to be there and to see the power of what this, between the legislation and the loan authority and the creative thinking at the loan programs office, like what we can do together.
All right, I'm going to hit this with three things. The first one is around the time has come for technology. I mean, I've spent my career investing and developing and doing things that were new and breakthrough. Example, heat pump water heaters, gas or electric. We've got new gas technologies that are 140% efficiency, which never would have been affordable or realistic in prior days. And that's really exciting that we have that to look to the future. The second thing is around swinging at the big things, the really hard to decarbonize markets, and getting the customers behind that. Use a Maersk, right, as an example. International shipping company that wants green methanol, and they're getting behind that. And that's exciting because that enables technology that exists and enables the ability for us to put that into the marketplace, which otherwise wouldn't have been there. And last but not least is really how do we reuse our vast infrastructure and put these new fuels and blended hydrogen or hydrogen into that and have a zero emission future ahead of us. Wouldn't have happened without the policy, without the consumer sentiment, and without utilities and people in this room driving that forward. So really three big things that are taking place that 10 to 15 years ago, I don't know I would have said that I saw that becoming reality.
All right, well, we have time now for some audience Q&A. If you are interested in asking one of our panelists a question, please raise your hand. We have some mic runners. I think I see does anyone see a hand? We have one right here. And please introduce yourself.
My name is Farouk Harbiye with OATI. In response to Heather's question, Leslie said transmission. I think the focus needs to be on distribution. I think distribution is the Achilles heel of the grid, and we need to put more focus on the distribution side.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you. Transmission. If we're going to bring renewables at scale that are being developed and have access to that power, we need to expand the transmission grid. So Leslie is absolutely right. I agree 100% with your app, because ultimately what's going to enable and empower the customer is a dynamic, flexible, integrated grid. So on the distribution side, being prepared for that, not reacting to that. Now, one of the things that we have today, as you look at electrification of end use, whether it be the heat pumps, the heat pump water heaters, whether it be an EV, or whether it be putting PV or battery storage in your home, we need to be able to leverage all of those resources. So one is to take advantage of the distribution grid, make sure that we're maximizing the asset utilization there first and foremost, expand when necessary, but then also be able to use creative load management techniques in order to be able to support that. So absolutely agree that the distribution grid is essential to being able to realize this clean energy transmission, that we use electricity by and large to decarbonize the economy, the end use customer. So great point.
I see we have a question in the corner in the back.
Following up to that prior question about both distribution grid upgrades and load management, what types of, not technological innovation, but regulatory innovation is needed to allow for maximal deployment of DERs in the meantime, but also proactive distribution planning, rate making, and authorization so that we don't run into distribution saturation points where transmission upgrades are not adequately planned for in the timeliness for decarbonization?
You want to take that?
Sure. So I think one of the opportunities our industry has right now is we think about integrated system planning. We got to change the horizon that we're looking at. We need to look a little further out in terms of distribution impacts and then assess from a grid perspective how are we going to manage that load that's increasing? So I think integrated system planning, and I say integrated system planning, it's different than integrated resource planning that we used to do. That was really siloed. We need to be able then to have a more future-looking assessment of what grid impacts might be so we can proactively plan accordingly for that. You mentioned regulatory environments. EPRI informs the regulatory construct. We try to point this out. Load forecasts. It's not only electrification of end use. I know in PG&E's territory, Microsoft is down in Silicon Valley. High-priced real estate, and the utility, when you think about a data center, it's typically they look for cheap electricity somewhere in the country, but they're willing to invest in Silicon Valley. High-price real estate down there, and I think 60 to 100 megawatt data center that they're building, it's also that load that's coming on, whether it be around AI and what's going to go on that, quantum computing, but also then the reshoring of manufacturing in the U.S. So you got electrification of end use, you got the reshoring that's going on. You need to be able to look out for our future, from my perspective, in order to plan for that appropriately. Because remember, at the end of the day, if the customer's at the center of this, Amazon comes to you and says, hey, I need about 3 megawatts worth of power to power my distribution center, and I'm going to electrify my fleet, and you say that'll be 1.5 to 2 years, you're probably going to lose that customer right at that point, and it's going to impact this whole notion of electrification going forward. So I think we have a real opportunity to think differently, but we got to get the regulators to think differently also.
Yeah, and if I could just add on that, because I talk to regulators all over the country, you need a forward-looking utility that's thinking about these things. So PG&E is clearly doing that. I mean, that's why we're all here in the room today. Some utilities are not, and I talk to them all. So some utilities are really, and if the utilities aren't bringing it to some of the regulators' attention, they're sort of like, problem, what problem? So leaning into the utilities and then canvassing NARUC like nobody's business. That's what I do. I work those halls. But just trying to educate the regulators. A lot of the regulators, by the way, are involved with EPRI. So it's not like, they're all sitting there in the dark. But I think oftentimes regulators move at the push of, especially in terms of innovation, at the push of the utility. Like, the regulators don't often push down to the utility, you must do this, that, or the other. It's often the utility saying, hey, I've got this great idea to manage this problem that I see coming down the road in 5 years. This is how I'd like to try to solve the problem. Oftentimes it sort of bubbles up. So we need it from both angles.
Yeah, and just real quickly, just to add, Leslie mentioned EPRI and the regulators. We have an advisory council group that of external individuals that can help guide EPRI in terms of our public mission. We're lucky to have Leslie as part of that group, but to Leslie's points, we do have 12 regulators that sit on that advisory council. So they're able to hear about these challenges, these issues that need to be addressed. I will say, Leslie makes a really important point, though. Culture of innovation from a utility is going to have a much different response from a regulator than a utility that says, I am a service provider, and when technology is available, I apply it on behalf of my customers or ratepayers. And that's a whole different attitude that is going to help influence, inform, drive regulators to different decisions going forward. So I appreciate you bringing up that EPRI's engaged with the regulators.
I love where this is going. It's the innovation of the technology and the R&D, the innovation of the regulatory construct, and I would add the innovation in our planning and in the way that we engage with our customers. And just to give a shout out to our regional service model, and I know we have a couple of our RVPs here today, one of the things we're trying to innovate on is how do we better understand our customer needs before they need that capacity connection or the interconnection, right? So that we can proactively plan together to make sure that we are building that grid and that infrastructure that we need. And I think that's another important innovation that we're doing in real time. All right, question over here.
Thank you. This is for Leslie. My name is Paul Noddy with ESS. We're makers of long-duration energy storage. And I wanted to follow up on your comment about transmission, because I read a report from LBNL that talked about the increasing curtailment of wind in SPP and MISO territories in particular, but that also in California, curtailment of solar 2 to 9 hours a day. Can you talk more about how upgrading transmission and efforts that DOE is doing, the federal government, will help improve that, reduce the curtailment, and bring more clean electrons into customers' homes?
Well, curtailment's a function of two things, right? Storage and transmission, right? So to the extent that there's oversupply of renewables at certain hours of the day, placing incremental storage there such that that can be used, at off-peak times of the day, that's a solution. In terms of DOE, I mean, you have the tax credits for standalone storage now, and we are actively engaged in evaluating long-duration energy storage on the innovative loan side, and then we can also fund on the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program, we can fund storage if it is related to retiring infrastructure. So an example would be a utility's retiring a bunch of coal plants and they're replacing it with renewables plus storage plus transmission to interconnect that plus demand side programs. So, sort of an integrated, holistic solution. The reason I said transmission is just because of the distributed nature of renewables, and the administration's goal is 100% clean electricity by 2035. And so there's not only a need for vast amounts of new transmission, which is very difficult to site, permit, and build, but also, can we reconductor our existing grid such that it can carry 2x the capacity on the existing rights-of-way. So, I mean, that's just a real push for the administration and an area that we're particularly focused on.
So we have a lot of participants with us online, so I'd love to take a question from our virtual audience.
Question from online. Where is a majority of the $369 billion in federal funding being spent? Is it grid infrastructure improvements?
Fortunately, that's on our website. It's called our monthly activity report, and you will see in a color-coded one-pager a chart that shows where we're getting the applications in by technology. And you'll see that it is in everything from, we're not a grant program, we're a loan program, so we don't pick winners and losers. We just, as the applications come in, we evaluate them. So what we put on our website every month is an update of the applications that have been received and which technology category. So you can see we've received applications for green hydrogen, small modular nuclear reactors, transmission, EV charging, renewables, storage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see by technology every month where the applications are coming in. That doesn't necessarily mean all those applications are going to get through. So right now there's 151 applications being considered. Definitely not all of them are going to get through. It's a tough process to get through. I won't lie to you there. But you can see where the interest is by technology.
I think we have time for one more question. I see one here in the middle of the room.
Hello, my name is Ömer Karaduman. I'm at Stanford GSB. My question is for the whole panel, following up the type of questions that Heather asked. Rooftop solar, is it underrated or overrated?
Is
Rooftop solar.
Is rooftop solar over or underrated?
I think rooftop solar is part of the solution, but it's just one piece of the solution.
Yeah, I don't know why it would be overrated. And I definitely don't think it's underrated. Especially, I wouldn't admit that to this audience, even if it were true. No, I think it really has the potential to be, if the utilities can figure out how to really optimize it and integrate it into the grid effectively, I think it really has a tremendous potential, especially as we think about, those are scary numbers that Quinn was talking about earlier, and Jason, about the growth in electricity demand. I mean, wow. How are we going to do that? Like, we need the distributed side of the equation to get there.
I think like most technologies, I'd say rooftop solar it really is location dependent at this given moment in time and what fits economically. Here in California, seems like an excellent solution. There's parts of the country where maybe it isn't as viable of a solution at this moment, but its time will come there eventually.
Great. All right. Well, that wraps it up for us. How about a round of applause for our wonderful panelists?
Thank you.